Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to start our EDUCA DPS podcast, and today the topic is around attendance and why it matters every single day. But before we start, I want to thank our sponsors, VS America, the suppliers for flexible furniture for our schools. You'll notice our new furniture, and this is the exact same furniture that's available in most of our schools. Here's their tagline: together we're creating future-ready learning environments where comfort, choice, and engagement drive student success for every learner. Ready for takeoff? In 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to the EDUCA DPS Podcast. My name is Javier Ibarra, and today in the studio we have Dr. Cori Canty, School and Unified Improvement Planning Manager here at Denver Public Schools. And today our topic is around the conversation about why attendance matters and why it matters every day. Cori, welcome to the EDUCA DPS studios. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you, Javier.
To kind of get this started and get like a little icebreaker out of the way, what are some things that your department does to ensure our schools are leaders of change? And maybe talk about those commitments that create change or benefits for our students and their families.
Sure. Specifically around attendance, what we're really emphasizing district-wide and with all of our school leaders is 3 things. We call them the 3 Ps. That whenever you're talking about attendance, that it's a positive conversation. We're not talking about the negative consequences. We're talking about the benefits of strong attendance, that it's a positive conversation. We also want there to be proactive conversations so that there's a lot of information early on as opposed to after there have been big problems with attendance. So we want it positive, we want it proactive, and lastly, we want a real focus on problem solving so that we're really working together, we're partnering together with families to resolve problems, to address the problems that are barriers to attendance, and we're not coming at it punitive or with negative consequences, but that we're working together with our families to try and solve problems to be able to ultimately improve a student's attendance and their school success.
So it's safe to say that we're taking a very positive approach to school attendance versus a punitive approach.
Perfect. Perfectly stated.
So for our audience, I want to give you a little bit about the topic and give them a little reference, right? Last year, you were here with us talking about why attendance matters. It hasn't changed. But because we were seeing such a big issue with our students' loss of learning and due to poor attendance, I want to lean into the first question, which is, have you noticed any positive changes that you'd like to share with us? Maybe give us an update of where we are with our attendance efforts.
Sure. What we noticed last year was that there were quite a few months during the year where we were really making a strong impact, yes, with attendance rate, but most importantly with chronic absenteeism rates, which is the percent of students that were missing an awful lot of school. We had quite a few times during the school year where we really reduced that number of students that were missing a lot of school. We know we're not aiming for perfect attendance. We're all human. We know people get sick. There's all kinds of things that happen that prevent 100% attendance. And we still emphasize the importance of really, really strong attendance and having students not miss too much school because that affects a lot of different things. Last month, we noticed quite a few pockets during the year where we really improved the number of students that were missing a lot of school, which means that those months, there were a lot of students that had strong attendance, which was a fabulous thing to see. Already for this school year so far, we have made a huge impact according to the data that I have available for me today, which is up till today's data, that we really are reducing the number of students that have missed a lot of days, that the percent of students that have strong attendance is really improved this year compared to last year. We're on the right track this year.
Wow, that's amazing. And so
it's exciting.
I know that when we spoke, you and I, we actually have a few meetings and other things outside of the podcast here. And I know last time that we spoke together, we talked about, is there a single issue? And because there isn't a single issue of why folks or students aren't attending school every single day and on time. That's the new messaging here.
Yep.
We're going to dive into all of that here in the podcast today in our conversation with Cori. And so my next question for you, Cori, is why is consistent school attendance important for student learning and achievement?
I think that's probably the most obvious connection that most families have. When a student is at school on a regular basis, when they're on time, when they have more than 90% attendance rates, there's a direct connection to their academic success and their ability to continue to grow academically. And this starts from a very early age. 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, kindergartners with strong attendance are much more likely to read at the appropriate grade level by the end of 3rd grade than students with lower attendance.
Which I know is on everyone's mind. It's a bit of an issue, right? We have the state read campaign, which is very important. And just for our audience, I'll give you kind of a little bit of background because I used to run that campaign when I worked for the Colorado Department of Education. And so up until 3rd grade, you're learning how to read, right?
Yep.
And so that's very important. You're learning. But after 3rd grade, you're reading to learn.
Exactly.
And if you don't know how to read by 3rd grade, that's a huge indicator of the future success or lack thereof that you will have. And it's also an indicator of like if you're going to drop out or not, right? And so it's important for us to, especially in the early years of your education, to make sure that you get every chance possible to read by grade level so that you can have a successful education.
And that starts in preschool and early childhood. At the 3-year-old and the 4-year-old level, all of those skills that our youngest students, our youngest scholars are learning all rolls up into keeping them on track in kindergarten, which keeps them on track to 1st grade, which keeps them on track to 2nd grade. In 2nd grade, we're actually expanding the ability to read, so it's not just reading fluency, but it's also those skills they need to be able to read, to learn through reading, which it doesn't suddenly switch in 3rd grade. We don't suddenly like, okay, now I'm no longer learning to read, I'm reading to learn. Those skills are all built out through previous grade levels. Yeah. So one of the things that we say frequently is it's much easier to start a strong habit from the beginning than it is to let a habit of poor attendance go for 4 or 5 years and then suddenly correct it. By that point in time, there's a lot of holes and gaps in that knowledge that the student has missed by having poor attendance, which is going to make it that much harder for them to catch up. We really want to emphasize the positive, though, right? Stronger attendance, you're a lot more likely to read on grade level by 3rd grade. Strong attendance in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, you're much more likely to graduate on time with a lot more college and career and job opportunities than if you have poor attendance.
I kind of just want to unpack a little bit of what you just said there. One of them being the graduation, right? We talked about graduating on time.
Yep.
It's traditionally 4 years, right? But there is such a thing as a 5-year and 6-year mark, which is still important, right? We want our students to be able to have the resources to graduate, period, right? And so I wanted to kind of make that distinction for our families, right? Why do we consistently say on graduating on time and the 4-year graduation rate? Well, it's because that's what's going to give you the best opportunity for success.
Right.
I want to share a story with you. So a long time ago when I was a student here at DPS, my mom had heard, they featured this student on the news, and she had never missed a single day. It was a young lady. She had never missed a single day of school. And when she graduated, the school district bought her a car.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it was pretty amazing. And this was like in the 90s when this story came out. And because of that one story, my mom never let me miss school. She was so
Motivator.
hopeful. Yeah, she was so hopeful that I would get that. And so consistently I would get like best attendance awards, stuff like that. And it really helped, right? Because I was an English learner at a time where we didn't really have English learning classes. So I was fully submerged in English classes, struggling, right? Until we figured that whole situation out. But it's just one of those things, like that little thing made my mom make sure that
you were at school every day.
Every day.
To your point about students that may not graduate in 4 years, they may graduate in 5 years, they may graduate in 6 years. We want students to graduate. And regardless, there are so many opportunities, even if you have strong attendance and you can graduate in 4 years. Many of our high school students take advantage of free college classes and free CTE classes, which you need to have strong attendance for. Even if it's your 4th year or your 5th year or your 6th year, you still need to have strong attendance for in order to get those college credits that the district can support you with. So there's, even before graduating from high school, there's a lot more opportunities for students that consistently keep showing up.
Well, that leads me right into what my next question is about benefits, right? And so how else does consistent school attendance help our students in their well-being in general?
Sure. One of the things that's less obvious that a lot of people don't usually think about when they think about attendance and what the school's role is, most people think school, academics, school, test scores, school, college. It's not as obvious is that by participating in school on a regular basis, this actually helps support a student's social development in terms of learning how to interact with peers and in terms of learning how to interact with little friend group fights, and how do you navigate those kinds of things. And it also, with the amount of social emotional learning that we provide for our students and that we support our students with in Denver Public Schools, everyday attendance also helps support their their emotional well-being and development. All of those things matter for our students. It's helping the whole child develop not just their academic competencies and skills, but their social skills and their emotional skills. This is all part of how we grow up in our society. Students don't exist in a vacuum. Families don't exist in a vacuum. There's all kinds of other opportunities to learn and develop by being part of this community that we call a school.
I know that a lot of folks, when we think about, like you said, when we think about school, it's just one track mind with, well, they're here to learn, right? But a school is such a ecosystem, I would say, right?
Absolutely.
A lot of learning also happens in the halls, and you alluded to that around the social structure, the hierarchies of social well-being. And we had this conversation with a few of our guests that we had in a previous podcast, Dr. Grant and Dr. Linneman, who were talking about the anxious child. And how children are anxious to go to school, and so they miss school. But it's like a cyclical thing, because the only way that they're going to get the help that they need around their anxiety is by going to school. Yeah, and so it's yet another touch point on why we agree, and science backs it up, and data backs it up on why it's important to attend school every single day. And on this podcast, in this conversation today, that's what we're going to be talking about in great depth.
One of the things that families, they see an immediate problem in front of them with a student their child might be feeling really, really anxious and too anxious to go to school without thinking ahead to the next day. Will you be more anxious after having missed a day and then having come back to school?
Right.
Because now you've missed a day and you're behind from your peers.
Sure.
So it actually can snowball really, really quickly. Yes, we understand anxiety is a real thing and it really affects the students. We understand that completely. And it can make it worse by actually missing school.
Right, because it's about that consistency, the daily routine, and working at a big problem, right? I think of that photo of the elephant. How do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. And so how do you get an education? One day at a time.
Absolutely.
Right? I just coined that for everyone listening.
I like it.
Cori, I want to ask, some families are getting messages either through their app, ThrillShare, or text messaging around their students being chronically absent, but some of them are excusing their students. And so what does that mean? If I had a student and I called them in and they're happen to be sick, we happen to take a vacation, they had a dentist appointment, they're all excused absences, but I'm getting messages that my student is chronically absent. Why?
We want to emphasize that we want students in school. And regardless of the reason why they're not in school, we want them in school. Chronic absenteeism, whether or not a student is chronically absent, this is actually a state and a national term that's used. What it refers to is when a student misses 10% or more of their time enrolled for any reason, excused absences, unexcused absences, or suspensions. If they miss more than 10% or more of their time enrolled, that student's considered chronically absent. We are in the process and will continue to send out messages to families, even if their students are not chronically absent, just so that families have that most up-to-date piece of data, that information around here's how many days of school your child has missed. They've missed the equivalent of 2 days so far this school year. They are not considered chronically absent. We want your child at school.
Right.
Or they have missed 10 days so far and they are considered chronically absent. We want your child at school. Chronic absenteeism really emphasizes just the base fact. Is your child at school or not at school? We want all students at school as much as possible. And we understand students get sick. And
Yes.
we're all human. We
Yes.
get sick.
Yes.
So we're not emphasizing perfect attendance because that's unrealistic. When your kids have a fever of 103, we want them to go to the doctor and not be at school. We understand that. What we're emphasizing is 90% or better attendance.
Okay.
We understand people are human. We understand that you've been trying to get into this doctor for 3 months and the only appointment that's available is at 2 o'clock during the school day.
Sure.
We understand those kinds of things. And we want to minimize that time out of school for whatever reason, 90% or more at school. We also do this by the minute, too. So we hear from families and DPS because we know that if a student's never technically missed a full day of school, but they're showing up to school an hour and a half or 2 hours late every day, that's impacting their math and literacy, or whatever those first 2 classes are, those first 2 lessons are that they have in the day. That student is still considered chronically absent, even though technically they've never been absent from school because they're missing more than 10% of their time enrolled in school.
At any given time, yeah, exactly. And so this is kind of the think of this as a public service announcement for families that you can be excused but still considered chronically absent, because chronically absent has to do with how much time you're away from school and therefore away from learning.
Absolutely. Chronic absenteeism is also really in control a lot of the times, almost all the time. There's a lot of control over whether or not each student's chronically absent. Let's say your student's only been enrolled, it's the end of September right now. Let's say your student's only been enrolled for 10 days because you just moved into the neighborhood and already they got really sick and they missed 2 days of school.
Right.
So they've missed 2 days out of their 10 enrolled. That student is considered chronically absent. Now they're recovered, they don't have a fever. You can send the student to school on time every day, and after 10 more days, they won't be considered chronically absent anymore because that number has gone less than 10%. There's a lot of control over whether or not a student's considered chronically absent.
Cori, I want to ask, and I want to get back into this, but I have some questions here,
Sure.
some follow-up questions. What are some of the long-term effects of chronic absenteeism? And of course, we're leaning into the positive, right? That's the whole point of this
Sure.
conversation. But I don't think anything positive without anything real is worth of mention, right? So we need to be positive about it, but we also need to be real. And so
Sure.
in keeping that in mind, what are the long-term effects that chronic absenteeism can have on a student's education and their future opportunities? What are they at risk for?
Sure. So it depends on your definition of long-term. If you're looking at the 3, 4, 5-year-olds, it's about being able to read on 3rd grade and being set up for success for all the rest of their K-12 education. If you have a rough start, the 3, 4, 5-year-old school age, sick an awful lot. We know those things happen, but then attendance improves and you've got above that 90% mark and you're back on track. How do you keep that up during middle school and especially during 9th grade, transitioning to the high school? The stronger the attendance in middle school and that especially 9th and 10th grade, the more opportunities you have for some of those college classes and CTE classes that we talked about, the more job opportunities you'll have. You've built those really strong habits that will take you through the rest of your life. We can think about people that we know that we've worked with from time to time that are always showing up late and they're always behind on getting their tasks done at work.
Sure.
Some of those people, depending on the level that you work, they no longer have jobs there anymore because they were showing up late all the time, and that impacts your pocketbook.
Well, let's take the moment to call them out on this podcast. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But you mentioned, and you touched on my next question, which is, how does regular attendance build good habits? And this is one of them, right? Like if you are showing your kiddos from 3, 4, and 5, right, which is generally a good age group to start teaching them good habits, that it's important to show up to somewhere and show up on time, the likelihood of them retaining that lesson throughout their life is very high, right? And like you said earlier, it's easier to start a good habit than it is to repair a bad habit, if you will.
Absolutely. Some of those good habits that families can do from the very beginning are making sure that the students have their homework done, they've got their clothes laid out, they've got everything ready to go the night before school. It's making sure that they're ready to go so in the morning they can wake up, they can get ready, and they can be out the door without having to scramble for backpacks and things like that. Another really good habit, which is especially important for some of our preteens and our teenagers, is making sure they're actually getting sleep at night, which means a lot of times taking their cell phone and putting their cell phone in a central location as opposed to letting them have it in their room
I can't believe you just said that.
9 or 10 o'clock at night. As a parent of teenagers, it's a battle, and it also sets them up for success throughout life. Think about some of those things that we want students to do. Especially, we hear from a lot of families, well, my child's 16, they should have those skills by now. 16-year-olds' brains are not fully developed. Research tell us brains are not fully developed until people are 25, 26. Your 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old still needs those structures around making sure you've got things ready the night before, that they're getting a good night's sleep and they're not impulsively reaching for the phone when it buzzes at 2 a.m. to answer a social media message. And then having a hard time waking up the next morning. Again, it's much easier to build those structures in when kids are younger, 3, 4, 5, or when they first get a cell phone. Hey, here's your first cell phone. Every night we're going to put it in the dining room instead of keeping it in bedrooms. I'll do it for myself too. That's some self-discipline for the adults. But we're all going to do this so that we all make sure we get a good night's sleep, which that means when when your child then becomes 17, is like, why can't I have my cell phone at night? You've already pre-established some good habits.
And it's pretty clear, right, for our folks listening in, both our students and our family members that are listening, right? What you just said is pretty radical. I'm just going to call that out right now. And I'm sure that 8:30 to 10 p.m. in the Canty household is a battle every single night. I'm just going to call that out as well, unless it's a Friday, Saturday, right? But I think you mentioned a lot of things that for folks that are in the work like us, we understand these things, right? We understand this is the latest and best practices. This is what scientists are telling us. This is what data analysts are telling us, that if you want your child to be at school on time the next day, that habit actually begins the night before, right? Making sure that they have every single chance to succeed. And as family members, as parents, and I think as students, I think we can all agree that any chance that we can get to improve our situation, whether that's in life, successful, whatever you want to call it, right, monetary, we should be able to take it. And it's as simple as creating good habits the night before.
And it could be that a family doesn't want to choose the cell phone battle at night. And that's absolutely their choice. What we want to have those families continue to do is monitor your students' attendance, monitor your child's attendance. And when you notice, which means going on to Parent Portal, checking every week, hey, I see you were late to these 3 classes. And then talking with the student about it, saying, what can you do? How can we problem solve this together? What can I do to help you get to your classes on time? Even for a 17, 18, 19-year-old, they still need their parents, and they still need those structures and those supports. So you may not choose the cell phone battle, and that is completely fine for your family and your decision, which is great. Still monitor their attendance, still talk with your child about the attendance, still say, what can I do to help you improve your attendance?
I'm glad we said that, because I didn't want any, we don't have a phone line here, but I didn't want any angry phone calls
no problem
coming in. I want to ask, and I want to kind of paint a scenario for you, right?
Sure.
So here's the scenario is, Cori, what if I have kiddos, and I'll give you two scenarios. I have a 8-year-old who's reading at grade level, and then I have a junior senior who's already been accepted to college, right?
Great.
And so I think we know where we're going with this. So why is it important for them to go to school every single day? Does attendance only affect my students, or is there a sense of belonging there with others? Like, does attendance matter to other students?
Sure. In both of those cases, regular and everyday attendance continues to help positively impact each of those students, the 8-year-olds and the junior and high schools. They continues to give them more opportunities for them individually. Additionally, one student's attendance, it's sort of like when you think about throwing a pebble into the water. There's all of these ripple effects, and those aren't as obvious for many people.
Okay.
With the amount of it all the way through from 3-year-old level all the way up to seniors in high school,
Sure.
there is so much group learning that's happening in our classes right now. Many of us have been in those situations when we think back to our own school time where we've been put into a group and that one person just doesn't show up, and they miss one out of every 2 or 3 of our meetings where we're trying to get the group project done, and we start getting mad at that person.
Yes.
It impacts the peers because of the amount of group learning that we have on a regular basis, on a daily basis, all the way through from pre-K all the way through high school seniors. But it also affects the teacher directly. The teacher then, when a student comes in and they're like, hey, what did I miss yesterday? Then the teacher many times will either have to stop either at the beginning or later on during the time that they're teaching all the kids that have been there to try and catch that student up. Even when the student does show up after having missed a day, they are not able to fully participate because they didn't know, they weren't caught up with what they missed the day before.
Now the teacher has to take
time. But now the teacher has to take time away from the class to catch the student up and to get them ready to work with the other students. Some families say, no worries, I'm going to ask for makeup work. You know, we're going to go on vacation. We're going to miss an extra 3 days right after this particular break to extend our vacation. So we're going to ask for the makeup work. The great majority of the time, the makeup work does not replace the instruction that's happened in the classroom because of the group work, if the teacher can get the makeup work together for those students, which is not a requirement.
Well, and then we think about how do we set up our teachers for success, right? And this is one of them. I can think of a situation, the student, when I was in middle school, he was always late for some reason. And the teacher was always visibly frustrated afterwards. And rightfully so, right? Because you have a plan and you have expectations and you are in charge and responsible, really, for the learning outcomes of those 20 or so students that are in your classroom for that class at that time. And for some weird reason in my entire life, I've had a math class always the first period of every day. I don't even, when I think of math, I think
math in the morning.
Math in the morning, right? I don't ever think of math in the afternoon. And maybe it's good because I don't know if I had any brain cells left by the end of the day, right? And just the way it works. But I think of that one student and I think of that teacher and how, you know, now there's a culture in the room of visible upsetness, if you will, because that student was always late, right? And so we talk about this, right? Like, okay, maybe once in a while, one single student is gone for one day, and so the teacher has to take 15 to 20 minutes of the day to catch them up on one subject, and another 15 to 20 minutes a day for the next subject. And there's, I don't know, 6 or 7 subjects a day. You know, that's
time adds up.
That adds up. But let's say it was just one student, right? But what happens when it's 2? When it's 3?
It multiplies.
When it's 4? And they didn't miss the exact same day. One student missed Monday, one missed Tuesday, one missed Wednesday. By the time we get to Thursday or Friday, we're all at different learning levels.
Right.
And that frustration, I think, comes not only for the teacher, but for the student, right? It's like, wow, like.
And for their peers that are all trying to do group work, and different days, different parts of their group are missing.
And so if we can alleviate that, which we can, and it's very simple, right? Go to school every single day on time.
On time. Students don't function, families don't, we're not in isolation of the rest of our broader community. Families exist in the community, in the neighborhood. Students exist in the community of their classroom. They exist in the community of their school. It's not like it's one isolated thing that doesn't affect anybody else.
Well, if we say that, you know, it takes a village, then this is exactly what we mean, right? It takes a village to also hold each other accountable.
Absolutely.
Cori, I want to ask, because up to a certain point, I don't imagine a kindergartner is responsible for their attendance so much as like a high schooler, right?
Sure.
And so when we talk about responsibility and we talk about accountability, how can families support good attendance habits at home?
Sure. And honestly, I think it's the same thing. It's just your approach around it is a little bit differently, right? If you have a first grader, a 6-year-old, you're still doing a lot more hands-on with, hey, let's pick out your clothes for tomorrow. Hey, let's get your backpack packed for tomorrow. And you're doing a lot more work with your child to get them ready for the next day. If the child is sick, you're communicating directly with the school and the teachers to let them know this is what's going on. We're going to take them to the doctor today because they've got a fever of 103.
Wow.
For a high school student, it's still the same kind of thing, but the approach isn't going to be like, hey, let's you and I, my 17-year-old child, let's go pick out your clothes for tomorrow. It's going to be, are you ready for tomorrow? Did you get your clothes? It's just checking in with them.
Sure.
But it's still parenting. It's just at that different developmental level. But how do you keep supporting those habits throughout the whole child's development to get them set up for success?
It sounds daunting.
Parenting.
Yes. Education.
Education.
Right. Cori, my next question for you, and I kind of want to shift gears a little bit. We've talked a lot about what families can do and what students can do. Let's talk about our staff. Let's talk about our teachers, right? What role do teachers in schools play in encouraging students to attend daily?
Sure. I think there's a couple of different things that we're really emphasizing this year. One of them is that schools are communicating regularly with families, and by regularly I mean once a month or so, about, hey, your child's missed 1 day of school so far this year, or your child's missed 10 days of school so far this year. They are not considered chronically absent. This should be as obvious to families and as a parent to families as a student's grade,
Sure.
if not more obvious, because you can adjust, you can do something about a student's attendance rate or whether or not they're chronically absent before a lot easier than you can around a calculus grade as a family member. So we're asking schools to communicate a lot more frequently with that precise number of how many days of school that student's missed so far, so that families are aware of that. We're also asking all of our families to be a lot more positive and to help and to partner together with families to help problem solve. Maybe transportation is an issue on an ongoing basis. The family doesn't have a reliable car, or RTD issues are popping up for those teenage students on a regular basis. So again, making sure that there's that two-way communication, that the schools are reaching out to the families to say, hey, we noticed, Javier has missed every morning on most mornings, is showing up 20 minutes late. What's going on?
Right.
And finding out it's an RTD problem, so being able to try and put their heads together to problem solve this together.
Yeah. And call RTD personally.
Maybe get them on a different route,
Yeah.
or find out what another possible solution is. Maybe there's a DPS express bus in the neighborhood that the family wasn't aware of. There's possibilities.
There's a lot of possibilities, and that's the one thing that I want to highlight, right? We want to talk about how we're helping. There's a team department, I would say, led by you, who is dedicated to helping reduce the barriers to access to education, right? We're talking about this especially with our traditionally underserved communities, right?
Absolutely.
How do we reduce the barriers of access to education, and transportation and attendance is one of them, I would say, if not the one.
Transportation is a huge one. Healthcare is another huge one.
Yeah.
And again, we have health technicians, we have nurses in our buildings. If there's a chronic health issue that's getting in the way of a student coming to school, asthma.
Right.
Asthma, especially during these cold months that are coming up, can really come
Activate,
up,
yeah.
and it makes it hard for students to go to school. How can we make sure that the school, our health plans, are partnering with families to put some plans in place? We can have students on health plans or like a 504 plan, or perhaps even an individualized education plan, perhaps,
Sure.
to help address some of these barriers that are getting in the way of the student.
Yeah.
With asthma, if asthma is the biggest issue, whether it's diagnosed or undiagnosed, we can use our connections and our partnerships with Denver Health and some of our other school-based community clinics to get some official diagnoses and some treatments for those students to help reduce those barriers.
And we do all of this because we want our children to succeed. We want them to...
We love our students and we want them to thrive.
Exactly. That's not just a tagline. It's how we feel here at DPS. And I think we can speak for all DPS employees and say, like, if you work for the school district, you want to see every learner thrive. That's a genuine feeling here.
Absolutely. I used asthma as an example. Same thing with mental health diagnoses. If a student seems to be really battling with anxiety, let's use our in-school connections with our professional school counselors, with our social workers, with our psychologists to get those needs addressed and improved using our resources that we have in our schools.
Cori, I know our time here is coming to an end, but I want to squeeze a few questions in if I can.
Let's go.
We won't do these rapid style because we want to get a good answer out of you. But
sure.
How does attendance connect to state assessments and overall school?
Mm-hmm. What's interesting is that every school gets like a report card or a performance rating. You hear about this commonly. Our school is green, our school is yellow, our school is orange, our school is red. For some schools, not for all of our schools, but for some schools, the attendance rate factors directly into that report card, that performance rating. For the majority of our schools, it is an indirect thing where the higher the student's attendance, overall at that school, the higher the achievement levels. There is a direct impact between high attendance and high achievement levels, so it does affect each school's performance rating from the state. When students attend school more, even if they're already achieving at a high level, we actually continue to grow those students so that they continue to achieve beyond this high level. We want to keep growing our students. Every learner thrives, even the ones that are already performing pretty strongly academically. Yeah. We want them to continue to thrive as well. And strong attendance is a really, really critical piece of being able to help grow students to achieve all of their potential.
Which is an amazing place to be, I would say, if we're at the point where our students have already achieved a lot of academic success, but they could potentially go into a next level, which I would, because I'm a sports fan, I would say maybe elite team, an elite student, right? Maybe that's another term coined here on the podcast where we can get that going. But I just think of like all the opportunities, and it's night and day. When I was a student at DPS and I see what opportunities were available for me then, and I look at the opportunities that are available for us now, it is night and day. And I see a lot of students taking advantage of it. And every time that I do, every time that I see a student taking advantage of it, it fills my cup with joy to see them, to know that they are truly thriving here in our school district. Mm-hmm.
We have students that are graduating with already having 2 years of college under their belt.
For free.
For free. We have students that are participating really, really strong and already being highlighted on our news channels because of their exceptional skills athletically or in co-curricular competitions, for example, speech and debate, or... We have
national champions here in this district, that's right.
ROTC, right? All of this is dependent on strong attendance.
Wow.
An athlete doesn't become an elite athlete by missing practices.
Same thing. You don't become a stellar student by missing school.
Precisely.
Cori, before we let you go, is there anything else that you want to mention that I didn't get to ask you, or something that came up in our conversation you're like, oh, I really want to drive that point home?
I think the biggest thing is that we truly want all students here. We understand we're no longer expecting perfection, we're expecting presence. We want students here 90% or more of their time enrolled. So if a student's enrolled 10 days, we want them to have been there for at least 9, if not all 10 of those days. Right. We want to partner with families to help resolve and address barriers and problems, rather than come at it as a, hey, you're going to get in trouble if you don't.
Right.
We truly want to partner with families, which requires that really strong two-way communication. So we welcome families reaching out to our schools. We welcome families reaching out to the district. We really want to support that two-way communication because we're all working to make sure that each child, each parent's child, and each one of our students is thriving.
as a community as a whole. Cori, I just want to say thank you for coming on to the podcast and for being a repeat guest. I think it's amazing. Now we've had a few years of being able to interview you and give updates on school attendance and why it matters every single day. So I just want to thank you for your time here at the studio.
My pleasure.
Well, friends and families, this concludes our EDUCA DPS podcast for today. A big thank you to our guest, Dr. Cori Canty, for such an important conversation. I want to thank the entire communications department here at DPS and, of course, our superintendent, Dr. Alex Marrero, for his consistent support to all our multimedia productions, including the EDUCA DPS podcast. Please, if you found value in this podcast episode, share this content with your friends, your family, a neighbor. Find us on all major podcast platforms under the DPS Podcast Network. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can see this podcast visually at Denver Public Schools Plus. And don't forget to tell your children more often, I believe in you and I know you can do it, and attendance matters. My name is Javier Ibarra. Until next time.